Rogers TV, Brampton.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm here today as a substitute for Frank Dale, and it's the only time in my whole life I'll ever get to wear a chain of office, so I opted to wear it. It's a little bit of bling, and it's not a big ego, it's just the fun of wearing it. It may never happen again. I would like to do the roll call. Everyone is here except Mayor Crombie is going to be late. Councillor Groves is ill. Councillor Yanick is on other municipal business. Mayor Jeffrey is not here yet. And that's it. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. And we are now going to go through the approval of the minutes. We have two sets. The first is July 7th, 2016 Regional Council meeting. Are there any comments? You'll move it? Seconder? Councillor Fonseca, all those in favor? Approved. July 21st, Special Regional Council meeting. Any concerns? Councillor Starr moved it, seconded by Councillor McFadden. All those in favor? And we're moving to the approval of the agenda. Councillor Shaughnessy?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd like to have motion included to be presented to council in September 22nd.
Okay. So you're adding a motion under section 15?
Yes, that's correct.
A notice of motion. And it will be sent out in the next agenda package. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Oh, I have to read something. Be patient with me, folks. The weight of the chain is slowing my brain down. That the agenda for the September 8th Regional Council meeting include a notice of motion from Councillor Shaughnessy regarding the Badlands parking be considered at the September 22nd, 2016 Regional Council meeting, and you unfortunately may be stuck with me again. And further, that the agenda for the September 8th Regional Council meeting be approved as amended, which we just did. Mover and a seconder. Mover and a seconder again. It was Councillor Starr, Councillor McFadden. All those in favor? Okay, we did that. You'll notice at your places that you have Regional Council lapel pins. At the request of some councillors, the clerk ordered some Regional Peel lapel pins. They come in either silver or gold. One has been handed out to each of you this morning on your desk. If you would like to exchange your precious metal, for example, if you got silver and you prefer gold, the clerk will accommodate that, or you can just swap amongst yourselves. And I would like to thank the clerk. I'm hearing good vibrations from everyone that they're very attractive pins. I've just seen one at a distance. I didn't get one. I got these. Frank may not get this back. Anyway, thank you very much to the clerk on behalf of council. Did a great job. They are very attractive, exceptionally attractive. Thank you. Now we are moving to 5.1. which is a delegation. A delegation is slightly unusual, and I was asked yesterday, the clerk and I sort of pondered this and decided whether this was going to be accepted or not, and we came up with a decision. The request to delegate is twofold. One, the waiving of fees for an FOI transcript, and two, supposedly inaccurate information provided to council by members of staff. Council made the decision to have the Fluoride Committee take the form of a study group. Only staff and expert witnesses would be invited to share information, answer questions, and clarify areas of scientific interpretation. Meetings would be open to the public, and written submissions by the public would be received and form part of the body of information that would be considered in a final report. The education session held in camera January 2016 was undertaken in good faith. Its legitimacy was challenged, and the challenge was upheld, therefore confirming a procedural error on the part of council. A subsequent request was filed asking that all pertinent documents from that session be made available to the public. Governing legislation on third-party reports, particularly given with the advanced agreement to those third parties that they would be kept in camera, requires third parties to be asked permission to circulate their materials. Certain presenters withheld that permission, as was their right. A subsequent request for a transcript for the recording of the meeting was made, and again, third-party permission may also be withheld, as it was for the written material. The transcript will require extensive editing at some cost to the region, should that happen. The requester asked that the fee for the transcript be waived. After careful consideration, the decision was made to waive that fee. That decision makes the first part of the delegation redundant, but I'm to understand there still may be some comments on that. The second part of the delegation, seeking to correct inaccurate information provided by staff, enters into the area of opinion and debates information that has not yet been accepted nor put into the report that will ultimately be written by the committee. In fact, this material can be entered in written form to the committee, as have many other opinions. Out of respect for the misstep taken by the committee, I am going to recommend to council that we hear this delegation for the standard 5-minute presentation. With the proviso, this exception does not set a precedent overturning the decision of council as to the established procedures to be followed by the committee, nor does it open regular council meetings to further delegations on the topics before the report of the committee is presented to council. So as long as everybody's really, really clear on that, I'm going to allow Christine Massey to present for 5 minutes today. I think it's only fair. Anybody has an objection to that, I'll hear it now. Seeing none, Ms. Massey, can you come forward? And I'm going to have to keep you right to the 5 minutes. And welcome.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. Actually, everything that I'm going to say does relate back to the closed meeting. Because the meeting was unlawfully closed to the public, we weren't allowed to attend or make our own recordings. We weren't allowed to report. To this day, we're completely in the dark as to what the 4 pro-fluoridation presenters said at that meeting. We've had no chance to critique or rebut or correct any inaccurate information. And so I am here partly to make sure that you have some correct information on something that's clearly inaccurate information that has been provided to councillors over the years. Again, we don't know if this was repeated again at the January 21st meeting. So I'm just going to very quickly, I can't obviously go through all my slides because they're very dense, but I'm just going to very quickly summarize. The fluoridation chemical used in Peel's industrial grade toxic waste, and there are no toxicology studies for this chemical. Public health staff argue that the studies are not needed because the chemical, once it's added to the water, 100% breaks down, absolutely. Therefore, the public is not exposed to this chemical. And also that the resulting limits of the individual toxins are all within allowed limits, and therefore everything is fine and dandy. This assertion is not at all supported by the scientific literature. One particular study has been cited as providing absolute proof that fluoridation completely breaks down once added to our water. The study by Finney et al. From Michigan, in fact, used a higher than pharmaceutical grade chemical, and the water that it added the chemical to was ultra pure, deionized water, devoid of any impurities whatsoever. So this does not even remotely reflect the reality of fluoridation in Peel Region and does not justify the lack of toxicology studies. My next slides show other important concerns relating to the dissociation argument, and I really urge everybody to read through these and make sure that they understand them. Further, even if it did completely dissociate and stay dissociated, the allowed limits of toxins are not even designed to ensure safety. They take into account the difficulty and expense of keeping toxins at levels that are completely safe. If you read through this slide, what it's telling you is fluoridation is causing harm. You are causing harm. And this is another issue related to the dissociation. Another questionable statement from our medical officer of health, which was published in the April Fluoridation Committee minutes. Again, we don't know if this was repeated on January 21st. I don't have time to go through it all, but it's one that can be rebutted in a number of ways. Dr. Hardy Lineback, who was the head of preventative dentistry for 18 years at the University of Toronto and is the co-author of the NRC's highly regarded 2006 review on fluoride in drinking water, which they spent 3 years on, is telling us that Dr. Davila is way off. On to the meeting itself. Like I said, residents are still completely in the dark as to what was said. There were 4 pro-fluoridation presenters, only 2 safe water presenters. We have access to the safe water presentations. We're completely in the dark. And we've been forced to make freedom of information requests, pay fees, be told that we would have to pay, for example, over $850. Most of my fee estimate has been waived, but there is a shipping cost that has not been waived. My position is that no one should have to pay the region even 1 cent to access information that we should, by law, have had free access to back on January 21st. So I'm asking that all fees, all freedom of information request fees are automatically waived, and any fees that were already paid were refunded. For example, the $5 application fee. There are other fees besides requests besides my own. So I'm asking that that automatically be taken care of. I'm also asking that to the extent possible, legally possible, all materials are immediately posted to the region's website. I understand that there's parts that, well, might have to be held back. It's very disturbing that we might never get access to the entire presentations that were made. Some won't go there, but anyway. So we're asking that that information be made freely available as much as possible. My other requests are that council question the reliability of the information provided by staff. You were misinformed in being led to believe that it would be acceptable to close that meeting to the public. It was not remotely true. The Municipal Act is clear as day in this regard, and I pointed this out to 5 regional officials 1 week before that meeting took place. Then we had to go through the expense of an investigation, which concluded that I was
Ms.
correct.
Massey, you're at 5 minutes. Can you conclude in
Yeah, thank you. So
15 seconds?
we're just asking for immediate moratorium, that you hear from experts on both sides regarding the chemical, and also that you hold responsible the staff that has given inaccurate information, and make sure that all future meetings and regional publications are balanced, because they have not been at all up until this point.
And I thank you for your presentation. I'm happy that we got through it without any difficulties. The material that you have given us is extensive. It'll be part of the minutes of the Fluoride Committee. I can assure you of that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Mr. Spovieri, Ms. Massey, can you stay at the podium?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Christine, for your presentation. I don't have any question of the delegation, but I do want to ensure that the information that was provided at the workshop is made available free of charge completely, that there should be no
I think the
charge
staff has
whatsoever.
already agreed to that.
Okay. And,
For example, the shipping cost is $12. That will be waived.
okay. Now, on the other issue about the comments that was made by on the dissociation issue, I would like staff to report back to the committee whether, in fact, the fluoride that was used in the study, in the experiment, whether it was a pharmaceutical grade or higher, or whether it was the actual hydrofluorosilicic acid that's being put into our water, and also whether the water was just a normal tap water or whether it was distilled water as indicated by the delegation. So
Thank you, Councillor Spaveri. As you know, at the Fluoride Committee, you ask all the questions you want, and staff has been very cooperative in answering. I'm sure Dr. de Villers will have those answers for us
Great.
at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Massey.
Christine.
I'd just like to say thank you to Dr. Hardy-Lineback and the other experts who I don't have time to mention, but they helped me with this presentation.
Good. Thank you very much. Can someone move 11.1 forward for receipt so we can have that business taken care of? Councillor Kovac, seconded by Councillor Moore. All those in favor of moving it forward? Any comments on it? Move receipt. Councillor Ross, Councillor Tovey, all those in favor? Carried. And I will turn the chair over to Councillor Moore, but not the chain of office.
Thank you.
Clutching it.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. Members of Council, the first item on the agenda is 6.1, the health status of Peel families and young children. It is an information item. Are there any questions? Someone like to move and second? Councillor Downey, Councillor Paleshi, all in favor? That's carried. The second is item 6.2, paramedic services provincial certification.
Dr. de Villers, are you doing the
So
presentation?
there is, I'm sorry.
No, in fact, it's my colleagues, Dr. Ward and Ann Fenwick, who are here to give the presentation in respect of that report. Sorry,
I am so
Councillor
sorry.
Moore.
Okay, now for sure you don't get the chain. Blew it more.
I think we should vote on that.
Madam Chair and members of Council, the presentation and written report that accompanies it will help Council get to know Peel families with young children, their vulnerabilities, and the actions that Peel Public Health is taking to promote their health and development. Nurturing the next generation is one of Peel Public Health's strategic priorities. It is theoretically based and evidence-informed. It is focused on improving health outcomes for children based on research that shows health in the prenatal period and early years of life optimizes children's development. As part of the priority, Peel Public Health has consulted and partnered with experts in the field, experts in the area of child development, including researchers, and our own human services staff, as well as other Success by Six partners. We have also completed an analysis of the data on the health status of Peel families, where we discovered some important aspects that public health, the region, and our community partners need to be aware of and consider when planning and delivering services. And we'll share those with you and the actions that we're taking to improve outcomes. For young children, 4 evidence-based foundations influence children's health, well-being, and future outcomes. They are stable, responsive relationships, which includes factors such as responsive parenting right from the start, good parental health and well-being, and social connections. Adequate nutrition, which refers to food intake, eating habits, food security, breastfeeding, and the introduction of solids. Also, safe and supportive environments, the places where our children and families live and play, and factors such as exposure to toxins. Healthy growth and development. This foundation refers to the physical health of children and their parents, which has the potential to influence learning, behavior, and health in later life. Knowing these foundations allows us in public health to take action to improve the health of families and children in areas where we know we can make the biggest difference. And progress on these foundations will also contribute to successful achievement of the region's term of council priorities, including reducing poverty and providing access to food.
So, what do we know about these families? Well, we have a lot of data from Stats Canada, from a special registry of information called the Born Registry about newborns, and we have information from the Live Births Registry, among other things. So all we're going to talk to now is about families with children under 6. Okay, so all the next data. So for the most part, our families are doing quite well, but they do have some vulnerabilities. In Peel region, typically we would have between 15,000 and 16,000 births a year. So that's about 43 a day, and they're roughly split among our 3 hospitals. So they each have about 10 to 15 a day. And if we think about who their parents are, about 40% of mums are mums for the first time. So most of our women actually are having their second or subsequent child. And we have when you look at this slide, you can see that we have about 96,000 children in this age group and about 136,000 parents in this age group. And together they make up about 17% of the region's population. So if you compare that with seniors, they're about 10.5%. So it's a big group in our population. So where do they live? This is a map of birth rates in the region of Peel. So the mid-blue are zones. These are data zones, and they roughly correspond to your wards, but not exactly. So the mid-blue is birth rates, those areas in Peel which have birth rates that are the average for Peel. You can see the dark blue have higher birth rates, and then there are a few areas in Mississauga and Caledon that have lower birth rates. Where do our parents come from? This slide shows you that about a third, 30% of our parents were born in Canada. And of the ones that were born elsewhere, about 1 in 5 have arrived in Canada in the last 5 years. So you're already probably thinking that these are parents who have been raised themselves as children in another context from the one in which they're raising their own children. So you can see that parents from South Asia who have immigrated from South Asia are roughly the same proportion as those who were born in Canada. So how old are our parents when they're having their children? So this is a graph of mom's age when she has her first child. And you can see that most mums are having their baby the first baby between 25 and 34. This is always of importance to us, and we're particularly looking for teen births because of the extra vulnerability. But we have very few teen births in this region, typically sort of 250, 260 a year of the 15,000 plus that we have. Our parents are quite well educated, and this slide shows this, but you will notice that about 28% or so have a high school or less, and this will affect their employment opportunities. And income. So this again can potentially create an important vulnerability for our families. Our parents are busy. And so when we look at their actual employment status, we can see that 94% of fathers and 59% of mothers are employed. And of these, 91% are employed full-time. And of those, 78% are working more than 40 hours a week. So they're busy. On top of that, their average commute is 30 minutes each way. So these parents have a lot on the go. Of course, employment directly relates to income, and income is an important driver of health. Median income is a form of average where half the people will be above that and half the people will be below that. So you can see, for example, if you look at our families where there's 2 adults and 2 children, the median income, $77,000. And that's actually lower than the median income for the same family type in Ontario by $10,000 a year. If you look at our families that have 1 parent and 2 children, for example, median income's much lower. It's at $42,000. But for our families who are classified as low-income families, and that's a StatsCan definition, you can see that those with 2 parents, 2 children have a much lower income of $23,000, and with a single parent with 2 children, $19,000. So this incomes at this level are going to create stress in our families.
So in addition to financial vulnerability, there are other areas of concerns within the 4 foundations of health. Parental well-being is critical, but sometimes the stress of poverty, recent immigration, low education, physical or mental illness can make it difficult to meet children's needs. Peel Public Health is taking action to support parents in vulnerable circumstances through our Healthy Babies, Healthy Children program, a home visiting program that helps parents transition to parenthood, providing health information and teaching, assessment and referral to services such as housing, social services, childcare, English language classes. Public Health recommends that infants be breastfed as much as possible for the first 6 months of life, and that at about 6 months, babies be introduced to solid foods. Currently, we know 64% of mothers in Peel continue breastfeeding until 6 months, and 25% of babies are given solid foods either too early or too late. To improve children's nutrition, we work with hospital and community partners, and we offer full-day walk-in breastfeeding clinic services and breastfeeding home visits. And for preschool-age children, we are working very closely with our human services partners to put healthy eating on the child care agenda in Peel. We know that community design influences the health and well-being of everyone. Communities where families can be more physically active on a daily basis have been linked to lower rates of chronic diseases, including type 2 diabetes and obesity. As you know, we've undertaken significant efforts in our region towards planning for healthy built environments. Environmental toxins are also a concern, with secondhand tobacco smoke being the most important toxin to which Peel children are exposed. 17% of Peel fathers and 10% of Peel's mothers smoke. And as highlighted in the March 31st report to Council promoting smoke-free affordable housing in Peel, over 30,000 Peel residents aged 12 plus are exposed to secondhand smoke in their homes every day or almost every day. To protect children and minimize this exposure, we are working with Peel Living to develop an approach to promote smoke-free, affordable housing in our region. The health of mothers and fathers before, during, and after pregnancy influences the health of their baby. We don't know much about the health of fathers right now, but we do know 35% of women entering pregnancy are entering overweight or obese. And more than 50% of those women are gaining more weight than is recommended during the pregnancy. These factors are associated with complications in pregnancy for mother and baby. Diabetes, high blood pressure, cesarean section, low blood sugar in newborns, and other medical conditions are the result of that extra weight. We're working with hospitals and local healthcare providers to alert them to these concerns in order to develop interventions to reduce complications. So in summary, Peel is home to a large number of families with young children, accounting for 17% of our population. Most Peel families with young children are doing well. However, some families experience health and social vulnerabilities, which can impact their children's healthy development. Peel Public Health, through Nurturing the Next Generation strategic priority, is taking action to optimize children's development, to improve the health and well-being of Peel's families within the 4 evidence-based foundations of health. So that's what we have to say this morning. We're here to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. And I apologize for going at Olympic speed through the health agenda. Councillor Downey.
Thank you, through you, Chair. My question has to do with outreach. I appreciate all of the work that you do. I think that the early years centers are critical for our communities and our neighbors. There was a time in my life when I'm pretty sure I was at a drop-in every day of the week. And I know that outreach for parents is a big deal, and giving that information and helping them raise their children in a healthy way is paramount. In my community, I find that where the bulk of my population is, most of the time those children are in the care of their grandparents, and oftentimes English is not their first language. So I'm wondering about your outreach, and if the outreach is done in multiple languages, and if it can be geared towards our seniors as well, because they're oftentimes the primary caregiver of the children.
That's a good question. And certainly with regard to outreach, when I think of the programs and services we provide, we do use translation services to assist us in being able to work with families. Your question in a broader sense, with regard to being able to provide that service, it isn't always there for us. We have staff from many different backgrounds, and some speak different languages, but we're not as fluent in languages as our population is.
Absolutely. Could the written material be provided in multiple languages? The material that parents are given when they leave the hospital, and when that initial contact is made, when you leave the hospital with your baby. Here's you get packages of information, pamphlets on breastfeeding clinics, where to access information. I just want to make sure that that level of information can be provided in multiple languages.
It's a great thought. So we know our parents in this age group mostly speak English or French. About 1% do not, but they're speaking another language at home. So about 12% of our children till age 3 are speaking something other than English and French. So your point about having things available not only for parents and suitable for children, but also for grandparents who are caregivers in other languages is very important. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Doctor, and for the presentation. Very informative. I was going to hold my question to later, but I feel compelled to raise this issue at this time because we're talking about young children, about breastfeeding, about the beginning of their lives and so on. As you know, we're undergoing a study on a review on fluoridation, water fluoridation. Through my research that I've done over the years, I've learned that in the U.S., the U.S. Medical Association, or they recommend that when you feed your child with formula, that they use distilled water, and not to use tap water because of the high concentration that they would receive of fluoride, higher than what the mother's milk would provide. And I recall when we had our workshop, our educational workshop, we were told by Professor Connett from the U.S. that the mother's milk has 0.004 parts per million of fluoride, whereas when you give it the tap water with your formula, you have 0.7 parts per million, which is about 200 or 300 times more concentration. So can we look at what the U.S., what they have recommended, why they have recommended to use distilled water with the formula, and perhaps maybe also introduce the same guidance here in Peel Region?
So we will be bringing forward reports, and this is the first of the reports, to do with each of the 4 foundations. And so a child's oral health fits very nicely into the Healthy Growth and Development Foundation. And so we would be expecting to speak to the development of the children's teeth, you know, at that time, because that's a very good point. So that's one part of fluoride. Then the other part has to do with food safety, and that's all in the Nutrition Foundation. And we will also be bringing forward reports about nutrition as we go forward.
Okay, and then I do recall Dr. Connett making that statement of our educational workshop, that if a child developing teeth, if it needed fluoride, the mother's milk would provide for that, a higher concentration than at the 0.004 parts per million. Nature would provide for that. And so, you know, that always stuck in my mind, that we have evolved, and nature has pretty well looked after all that the person needs to develop healthy. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Palashi.
I'll go to the medical officer. Oh, she's gone. Hi, thank you very much. There was a comment early on in one of the slides, I think it was before the slide that showed my area of Brampton in the dark blues, that 15 babies per day per hospital, the 3 hospitals in the region of Peel. I was wondering if we're able to capture, I know, I do know some people go to Georgetown Hospital, some people go to Orangeville Hospital, and also more families are going the midwife route. I wonder if we're able to capture those other 3 to get more accuracies, or were you able to capture that?
Yeah, great question about how the statistics work. So the statistics work for babies that are born in Peel, become Peel residents, so that's that 15,000 plus per year, no matter where they deliver, because of course some go down to Mount Sinai too, if they have a special need.
Sure.
Midwives are delivering some of our babies, sometimes in hospital, sometimes at home, but actually they create a very small percentage of our total deliveries, but they are also captured in these numbers.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So see, the presentation did generate some questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would someone like to move receipt of the report and the presentations? Councillor Gibson, Councillor Innes, all those in favor? That's carried. The next report is 6.2, the Paramedic Services Provincial Certification Process. It's for information, and there is no presentation. Are there any questions? Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All those in favor? That's carried. The next report is 6.3, Smoke-Free Ontario Act and Electronic Cigarettes Act Staffing. Councillor Ray. Raz.
It's okay, you can change my name.
Close. I'm really not getting that share of office, am I? No. Okay.
Maybe Councillor Paleshi can get you another coffee. I just really have a quick question. Is the funding, I know it said increase of base funding, but I just want to confirm that this is not just a one-time funding, that this is ongoing? Okay, thank you very much. That's all I need.
Would you like to move the report? I will move the report. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Fonseca. All those in favor? That's carried. And the last item is a communication from Dr. Eric Hoskins, the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care. Are there any questions on that? Moved by Councillor McFadden, seconded by Councillor Shaughnessy. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Miles is vaporized. So we'll go to the Vice Chair, Councillor Toby.
Thank you very much. Item 8.1, announcement of additional federal provincial funds for affordable housing social infrastructure fund. We have a mover. I'll move it. Moved by Mayor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Downey. All those in favor? Thank you. Approved. Item 8.2, Community Investment Program 2016 update for information. Councillor Moore, did you have a...
Yes, I have a question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On 8.2.6, there was a $60,000 grant in 2015 to Brampton Safe City. It was an annual grant for $60,876, but the organization closed its doors 6 months into 2015. So I'd like a response from staff in terms of why a decision was made not to claw back 50% of that funding allocation to recognize that.
A response from staff, please.
Through the chair, we were advised by the board in May of 2015 that they were not in a position to return the funding to us. Staff requested and received a rationale from them as to why they were not able to do so, and at that time we sought legal advice. We were told that the funding that was required was a reasonable severance payment and is an entitlement of a position such as this, and is also in compliance with the funding agreement that we had signed. So we were receiving legal advice that we were not in a position to be able to claw that funding back.
So the funding agreement that we had with the organization provided for those funds to be used for severance?
Through the chair, the agreement provided for reasonable funds related to positions. I may like to refer that, if I could, over to the regional solicitor.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick.
Yes, Mr. Chair. In essence, the agreement provided for the funding of the executive director position, and the legal advice that was rendered was that the application of funds towards a severance payment, which was a legal obligation of Brampton Safe City to the executive director upon the termination of the employment, was a proper use of the funds, and therefore didn't give rise to an entitlement to clawback.
Thank you.
Okay, then I'd like to suggest that staff take under advisement moving forward for all other community sustainable funding grants, that be taken into consideration, that there needs to be language in the contract that provides for a clawback if the organization closes. This is supposed to be capacity building grants, sustainability grants, and I personally, as a member of council sitting around this table, don't believe that those, providing that funding for severance packages is within the spirit of that. So if staff could take under advisement that moving forward, the agreements between the agencies and the region appeal protect the taxpayer from that kind of legal advice that provided for that to be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spoglieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the same issue, I'm kind of surprised to hear that there wasn't the proper language in there for clawback, because from what I read from a letter that was issued to members of council at the City of Brampton from the president of the association, the Safe City, he states in his letter that unspent monies from ongoing grants had to be returned, such as United Way. So it would appear that the United Way had some kind of language in the agreement of the funding that they would have to return the grants if they shut down. So can staff explain why the Regional Appeal wouldn't have had that requirement or in the agreement?
Mr. Chair, I'm not familiar with United Way's arrangements, but I think there's some question around what is meant by unspent money. And in this case, the money was spent. It was spent on severance. We wouldn't consider it to be unspent money subject to clawback.
Well, I believe that when the organization shut down, the money was there, I guess the association decided to use that for severances rather than returning it. And I don't know what there was any how much severance they received, because I know that they did use some city funds, which they're asking us to write off for severance purposes. So they did take a severance from the city grant that we provided. So did they double dip? So take two severances, one from the region, one from the city? Can we find out whether that happened? How much severance was paid out? Because we have the numbers at the City of Brampton, how much was paid out in severance, but we don't have the information here how much was paid in severance from the Regional Appeal funds. Can we find that out?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't have those figures readily to hand. I can tell you that in providing the legal advice to the Human Services Group that Commissioner Sheehy has referred to, there was a legal review which assessed the reasonableness of the severance and concluded that there was no grounds to challenge the reasonableness. But I don't have the particulars, the dollars here today.
So through the chair, were you aware that they were using also city funds to pay the severance? Did they disclose that to you?
Again, I didn't personally undertake the legal review that we're talking about here, so I would have to go back and review our file as to the details of the information that was available for that purpose.
Well, I would appreciate it if you can provide that to us, to the Councillor Moore-Knight. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. So that'll be direction that we'll bring that back. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Sato?
Thank you. I wonder if I know at budget time it's been asked for a more concise information on each of the agencies, what they do, what service they provide, and how they fit into these categories. But when we get the updates, all we see is a list, and there are some that I'm not familiar with that have. We're trying to do a search right now to see what one agency that gets over $300,000, for example, and I wasn't familiar with what they did. So Councillor Shaughnessy and I are trying to do a search to find out a little bit more about them. But it would be helpful when we get these updates to perhaps have a backgrounder that would give us the information as to who we are. I know this is not a report for approval, it's an information report, but I think it would be extremely helpful, because if I was asked, you know, you're giving all of this money to this agency, what do they do? I wouldn't have a clue for some of them. So I think it would be very helpful for council.
Through the chair, so going forward, we will provide more information on the mandate of the agency and the services that they provide.
And perhaps when we get into budget, we could have that when we get into our budget discussions as part of our budget book information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you'll move the item, Councillor Sato?
Yeah, it's for receipt, so I'll move receipt.
Okay, so you'll move receipt, and seconded by Councillor Fonseca. All those in favor? Approved. Thank you very much. Item 8.3, Peel Renovates Program. Any questions? Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Kovac, seconded by Councillor McFadden. All those in favor? Thank you. Approved. Item 8.4, Affordable Rental Housing Update. Here for information. Moved by Councillor Paleshi, seconded by Councillor Gibson. All those in favor? Approved. Thank you. And we have no communications. Turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Fonseca. I like this part.
Thank you, Madam Acting Chair. Item 10.1 is Procurement Activity Quarterly Report. This is for information, and it's a summary of 56 new contracts over greater than $100,000, both competitive and direct negotiation. Moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Scorbieri. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Oh, I did have actually one question about that. When under the appendix, you list donations. And under the donations, there's no value given. Is there? I mean, I know under these they're actually they're for stretchers, so I guess the value would not be that great. But is there a threshold where if there was a donation, the value would have to be listed, or is that not? I just don't know what type of donation values are given, or is that something that needs to be listed if we are to receive donations?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we would list it. Normally, it's a nominal value, but if it was something significant, we would.
But is there actually a legislation or act, something that says, or in auditing, or something that says we're required to list at a certain threshold, or no, there's nothing?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Item 10.2 is the 2017 budget update. This is also for information. There's an attached appendix that gives the timelines for the budget update, and there will be budget presentation on November 24th. But this report lists changes. We had put a target of 2.1% increase for 2017. This lists some of the changes that we have in the interim between when we approve that and changes that we've, as a council, approved on policy and service levels, how there will be there's now a projected budget impact of 2.7 instead of 2.1. Seeing no questions, I did have questions. A couple of questions. One, the affordable transportation estimates. It says in here that we don't know the numbers specifically for Brampton. Will we know that as of November 24th?
Through you, Madam Chair. We haven't got the information as yet. We'll try to work with city staff and see if we can get that by the budget date.
Okay, that's great. And also for the Peel Shelter, and I know there's a presentation coming up, but in here, so the projections of it is an additional, is it 1.2 million or is it 1.7 million? I know there's a presentation, but in this report it lists 1.2 million.
So the request for today's presentation is on the capital side, which is funded through development charges. What's built into this report is the operating impact, which is the 1.2
so
annually.
1.2.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So that's operational. And thank you for, in terms of the timelines, I know it had been a request that we receive the budget information as much in advance as possible. So November 3rd, we will be receiving an electronic copy. Will that include overviews by Peel Police, OPP, and the conservation authorities?
Sorry, just seeking clarity on that. At this point, it doesn't look like it will.
Could we make that request?
We can make that request.
So that we're not getting that information the day of?
Okay, I will make that request.
I think that was something that came up in the last budget cycle, that if we could have, even though they came and presented, they've already come to present and give some projections. I think it would be very, very helpful to have all of that, especially when it's indicating in this report, and they have indicated that it's going to be hard for them to meet our direction in terms of budget requests. So if we could get that ahead, that would be wonderful. I think that's all my questions. Okay, so Councillor Ross, would you like to move the report? Moved by Councillor Ross, seconded by Councillor Kovak. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 10.3 is the Conservation Authorities Act, proposed priorities for renewal, and this is an endorsement to the recommendation. Mayor Thompson.
So I hate to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to come back again. To me, it's a good report, and I think it's, if you read through it, it explains extremely well. But there's one thing that we need to do to assist conservation authorities, especially with the ability to maintain. What happens is you get illegal fill happening on conservation wetlands. You do not have the ability to get cost recovery or get anything done. Municipalities, we do. We can have the excavator in the next day if someone's infecting that wetland, and what we used to do in the past, and put it on the person's property taxes when something like this goes wrong. We have brought this up. The challenge we have is we have, in order to have a memorandum of understanding with Credit Valley or TRCA or whoever we're talking with, we need the blessing from the province. And I think we need to add in that, because in order to have a memorandum of understanding to work with the local municipality to protect our wetlands, because we are getting illegal fill on those wetlands that is in the jurisdiction of the Conservation Authority, not the municipality. And we can help the municipalities out, or the municipalities can help the conservation authorities out. The challenge is we need the blessing from the province to make this happen. And I've brought this up before, and I think this is something could we have added in.
We can add that recommendation into the report, or into what goes forward.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Mayor Thompson, it does in the recommendations, it does talk about defining roles of the municipalities. So you're saying that's not strong enough.
It's not strong enough because when we've gone and dealt with the M&R, we need the M&R to say to agree to allow municipalities to be able to have the authority to do it.
Okay.
And they said to do it in the floor-plan review. So this is, like, I know it's a repeat, but I'm just saying it's not strong enough. You're correct.
Okay, great. So that can be added in. I think the other thing, we passed this yesterday at the City of Mississauga, but under the sustainable funding piece, I think that has to be, if there could be stronger wording, just direction on sustainable funding from the province. The word flexibility gives, I mean, it's important to have the flexibility, but I think the sustainable funding from the province has to be more defined, and I'm not sure if the wording is strong enough there either. So if we could have some stronger wording around that, I think that's important as well. Councillor Innes.
Thank you. So you both have touched on items that I was going to speak to. One is the funding, and I strongly feel that if there are provincially initiative programs, that the province should be funding those programs, not the municipalities. And I think that wording needs to be a little bit stronger. I was sort of taken aback last year when we went through the budget and I saw that how much we give our conservation authorities to deal with climate change, which is a provincial initiative. So if the wording could be changed to be a little bit stronger on that ask, I think that's something that they need to hear. And I think that's something that the conservation authorities, I know, are asking when we sit around the board at the TRCA. That's something that they're asking as well. And then the other issue that Mayor Thompson had brought up with the fill, I represent a ward that has continuous fill dumping because of its proximity to growth. And there's multiple issues. One is they can get a permit through the TRCA of 999 loads on a 150-acre parcel, then go to the town and get a permit for 999 loads on the portion of that land that is represented by the town regulated area, and now they don't need a public meeting. Whereas if they had applied for that number of loads through either or, the town or the Conservation Authority, they would require a public meeting. So that's one concern, is that there's the lack of communication between the conservation authorities and the town. The other issue is when we issue fill permits from the municipality, we can take road securities to protect our infrastructure. When a conservation authority gives their fill permits, those road securities are not allotted. So that's something else that we need to be looking at. If we're allowing some of these conservation authorities to be regulating and permitting fill, then how are we protecting our roads and the infrastructure that we're putting forward? And that's a regional issue as well as a town issue. And the last issue is, as mentioned before, the ability to actually go in and clean it up. The town has the ability to go in and clean up illegal fill and put it back on the taxes. The TRCA doesn't have that permission. And so, you know, if we're really here to protect the most environmentally sensitive lands, which are those that are regulated by the conservation authorities, then we need to either give them the power to be able to go in and actually do something about it, or hand that authority over to the municipalities so that we can make sure that it is done.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Okay, thank you. Councillor Tovey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, I couldn't agree with the two previous speakers anymore. The conservation authorities can't even issue stop work orders, which is, it's absolutely ludicrous. And that's exactly what happens in the fill situation. They can't even, we go over and somebody's illegally filling by Cooksville Creek or by the Credit River, and all we can do is say, would you please stop? Of course, that's, which is ludicrous. So that entire section needs to be beefed up. And the other challenge with it as well, and we have the same challenge ourselves with stop work orders, is that once we issue a stop work order, and if the conservation authorities could, then we have to go to court to prove that it's a valid stop work order, and in the meantime, we have no mechanism to be able to actually make people stop working. So the conservation authorities absolutely have to have that type of power and authority. Otherwise, anything else we do really isn't going to work, because people will they'll just circumvent the system, and very easily so. So I'd like to thank both previous speakers for bringing that up. We really need to make that a lot stronger. Thank you.
Okay. So moved by Councillor Innes, seconded by Councillor Tovey. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And I think we'll move up information item, or correspondence item 11.4. This is a letter from Kathy Stranks at TRCA with regards to the Conservation Act. So we'll move that forward. Moved by Councillor Shaughnessy, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to 10.4, this is for information, and it's the regional chair had requested information and options for councillors on health and dental benefits. And okay, Councillor Gibson.
When I read this report, I was a little baffled of why it was here. I appreciate that Chair Dale might be trying to look out for us, but my particular view is that at the City of Brampton, I'm fairly well covered and don't need any more benefits. I appreciate that the region gives us $750 spending account for things that aren't covered under the municipality. I particularly think that is enough. And I think we have to make a decision. I know you said that this is for information, but do not we have to make a motion to make those changes? It's not just information. Yes. We have to make that decision. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the report provides basically a breakdown of what currently is offered, which you mentioned is $750, but also a breakdown if you were to add a full additional health and dental benefits, part-time health and dental benefits, or just an increase to the health plan. It breaks it down that way. So if there were to be a change, a resolution would be required today.
Well, I will not be supporting any change to it. I think what we have is fine. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you. I guess I had a very similar question to Councillor Gibson. I was a little confused as to why this report was here. I don't recall a formal request from around this council table to review our benefits, but we all have coverage through our home municipality. some have spouses that they can, share those health benefit repayments with. But I think that what we have through the region is currently adequate, and certainly with the coverage that we already have. So I won't support giving staff direction to come back with anything different. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McFadden?
Well, thank you. I certainly appreciate the gesture of the chair and staff for preparing the report. I know that he's a believer in proactive health and making sure that the employees and councillors are healthy. But I think the report also gave us some sort of understanding on the costs. So that was good to bring forward. And I think as well, we're very well covered at our municipalities, and I certainly don't want any change to the benefits that we have right now. So thank you.
Okay, so seeing no further, Councillor Gibson.
I'd be happy to move receipt of the report with no changes made.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Moore. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to 10.5, this is an update with regards to the youth shelter at 1B Knightsbridge, and there is a presentation. Mark Schiller. Good morning.
Good morning, Regional Chair and members of Council. We wanted to bring you back an update on the change in our budget estimate, which we need also for award of the tender that just closed yesterday. In the Council report, we indicated we would coming back today to talk about what the final price was of the tender, because we were only estimating at the time what we believed that the actual budget increase would be for the Chinguacousy Youth Shelter. Our preliminary estimate back in early April, before we got into any of the design work on the building, was around $700,000 as we reported to Council. We've been diligently working with our consultants and taking apart the building over the last several months to really understand the full scope of work. The tender closed yesterday, and that's why we're before you today to talk about what the real closing costs were. We went out to 7 different companies in the industry that we believed could get this done in a very short time frame. 5 bidders showed up to the site visit, and we received 4 bids in a range of $1.575 million to $1.696 million. So we're back before Council today looking for a budget increase of $1.25 million from the original estimate. Which brings up the total revised cost of the project to $1.95 million. Some of the reasons for the budget increase, which we didn't understand until we started getting into building and sort of taking it apart from a design standpoint, was that we quickly found that there was asbestos and mold abatement required. That work has already been done at a cost of $120,000 because we needed to get that work done early in order to meet the fall opening of the shelter. We ran into several, in order to bring the building up to current code, there were several code issues that we had to deal with the existing facility, accessibility issues that we had to deal with. Additional windows were required under the building code to the existing building. The mezzanine structure needed some structural upgrades because it didn't meet the new standards. The HVAC system needed to be completely replaced. The old system was based on in-floor heating that had degraded over many years, and because of the extent of the walls, the sleeping accommodations, the whole system had to be replaced under the code in order to make the facility suitable for occupancy under the new process that we were putting in. The fire system also had to be upgraded as well, including the sprinkler system. When we started going back and looking at the servicing, the amount of water the facility would now require, the water service had to be upgraded. They had been having previous problems with the sanitary lateral leaving the facility. We found out when we did further investigation on the previous use of the facility, so that also had to be upgraded. So water and wastewater servicing upgrades to the facility were around $30,000. Furniture and appliances, there's kitchens, there's bed locations for 30 use in the facility. Those estimated costs weren't in the original estimate, so that's around $50,000. There's a fair amount of yard cleanup. As you can imagine, it was for children earlier, so all the playground equipment has to be removed. There's new fencing that has to go up around the site for security as well. But I think the most significant cost was the cost to expedite the construction. So we're looking at having this facility constructed and occupied within 12 weeks from commencement. Right now the market is very busy. We weren't sure what that price differential would be. We had some indication when we finally saw the cost being much higher. We had done some value engineering on what the actual cost of the structure would be just before it went out. Unfortunately, we weren't able to report back to council because of the break, and that's why we're here today, because the tenders just closed yesterday. And it's the amount of time in order for us to construct all the things that we found needed to be added into the building, which brings the cost up to approximately $1.95 million. I'd be pleased to take any questions that you may have.
Okay. Mayor Thompson is on the board first.
Yeah, to me is, how did we're pretty good. The Region of Peel, and I'm going to tell you my experience in public works and everything else, Mark, we've been pretty bang on when we do quotes going out. And we're looking at more than double what was originally quoted. To me is the time frame. This is a lot of money that we're having to look at. And I guess my question going back is, are we better to retender it? And I know we want to have it occupied within. Are we better to back off the occupancy to see that we can get this, that it's right and it's affordable? I understand that you got some costs, and I respect that. I'm surprised that we didn't nail that the first time, but I get where you're at. But we're asking, you know, even for double, and we're not even coming in at that at the quotes. That concerns me a little bit. Are we better off going back to the marketplace and giving us a little more length of time?
I think if you go back to the marketplace at this time, you're going to probably ask for about you're not going to be having occupancy probably to the spring.
Yeah.
Contractors at the site visit, we were originally trying to meet the original schedule set by council to have them in this early fall. And contractors that were at the site visit, you know, quickly told us they needed a minimum of 3 to 4 months, but that was also working 7 days a week. And because of that, you know, you're looking at paying labor rates that are double time for most of the project, and that's what drives up, we believe, is a lot of the cost. If you were to go back to the marketplace and give them 6 months, 5 months to construct, again, you're not going to be in there till, you know, early spring or late winter. And I think the intention of council was to try to get them in before it started snowing. So that's why we did this as a very fast-tracked approach, knowing that time was not in our favor, and the marketplace has come back and said, if you want it done that quickly, this is what it's going to cost you. But we could delay it, you know, and have, you know, a late winter, early spring occupancy if that's what council decides.
Listen, I think for a youth shelter, I think it's very, very important. But on the other hand, you know, going past our cost estimate, we're more than double. You know, in some ways, you're looking at what your final outcome is to make it work. You're looking at 200%.
Yeah, with the original cost estimate as well, it was based on a cosmetic review without getting into and understanding the different options and the different things that had to be done to that building to bring it up to code. And I think that's what happened with our schedule. When we started getting in and understanding the condition of the building behind the walls is when we started having scope creep on the project that we had to deal with, whether we were going to build it for a shelter or if the property was going to be sold in the future.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Starr is next on the board.
Yeah, just going back to basics, what's the size of the building?
I'd have to go back to ask that.
How many square feet?
It's about 7,600 square feet.
God, what?
Was the option ever considered just to knock it down? Because you can build a building for $250, $300, and it's a great building. And that's your budget. That's a brand new building for $2 million.
That wasn't considered at the time.
How many residents or how many bedrooms, or give me an idea of what?
I think the shelter is designed for about 30 adults.
Well, I think you've missed something here. I mean, if you're telling me that it's roughly 7,000, 8,000 square feet, and a building for a commercial type building, which this is probably falls into, and I know a little bit about that. You're at a maximum, you're looking at $300 a square foot. You have the land, you have the services. I mean, if you have to upgrade, and you got no more mold, you got nothing in there, and for $2 million, and that's what it's going to hit anyway. For sure. I mean, you tell us it's going to be 1.95 by the time you finish, and to pay these premium rates. I'm astounded by $500,000 for 12 weeks' work. I want to get in on that contract. Can you retender it?
We could.
But I'm just saying, to me, as an option, why wouldn't you build a brand new building, which would be good for the next 70 years?
Okay.
Because if you rebuild, you know, these are questions. I want to ask the question.
That is an option worth considering. It's, you know, it's a renovation of an existing building, which can be expensive once you finally start to understand what the condition of the building is.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the original estimate was at a very high level before we got into that detail.
Okay, the commissioner would like to, I think, jump in here.
Thank you. Through the chair, council will recall when we brought this report forward that there was a sense of urgency as to finding alternative shelter accommodation for youth, and that is why we came from the perspective of renovating an existing building.
Well, no matter, okay, so maybe I can respond to that. No matter what happens, you're going to have a gap here. So where are those residents going to be in the meantime?
So we are coming out of the summer, which is a very busy period for the shelter system, but there is existing capacity in the shelter system right now.
Well, then that, you know what, I'd either be retendering or I'd be looking at a brand new building. To me, if I have to manage my assets properly, I wouldn't be building or rebuilding an old building that's already been proven to have mold and other problems within the building, and you don't know, you'll never guarantee that that's ever out of there totally. I've dealt with mold in the past, believe me, and I just think that you know, my recommendation, I'll make a motion that we relook at the whole thing and take a look at a brand new building. And then you get what you want. It's not a renovated building. Anyway, that's my take.
Okay, so Mark, you had mentioned there's possibility to look at that. Would the timelines be, or is that a whole other?
It's a totally different process. Again, you're talking about no occupancy on anything probably, and because it'd be a new building, we'd have to go back through a bunch of other issues with under the building permits. So you'd be looking at maybe occupancy for sometime next summer or later,
So
maybe next fall.
Okay, so, okay. Councillor Starr, have you put that motion forward, or are you just holding up?
No, I'd like to put a motion forward that we relook at either taking a look at this overall budget. If it means delaying residency by even a month or whatever, I mean, I can see $500,000. In all honesty, a contractor there is going to make it wine and roses every weekend for the staff. That's a lot of money on a small project like that. I mean, you know, if I sound astounded, I am. And then the motion really is that to take a second look and to revisit and take a good look at and quickly to have a brand new building. I know it's going to take more time, but if you've got other facilities and if it's going to cost a little bit to house them someplace else, and I'm not about getting rid of the ability to house the youth, I want the best facility possible, and that's what it's all about.
Okay, so as has been, as we've been reminded, we did, there was a sense of urgency when we approved this. I know the amount was, the initial projections were at a much, the amount was at a much lower amount that we were approving, but, okay, so you've put that motion forward. We also have.
I forgot to ask my first question is, how old is the current building?
Late 60s.
Late 60s.
Okay.
Oh, that cements my position.
Okay.
Thank you.
The Commissioner of Corporate Services also would like to comment.
Yes, through the chair. Just a couple of comments for council's consideration. One is the delay that has already been noted, but as well we have sunk costs already related to this facility. So a new construction would add to those costs as well. So I just wanted to make that point for council's consideration.
Mark, can you put your presentation up again? How many of those costs have already been, you mentioned the first, I think it was the first cost, the mold, money was already put into that, but how many of those, there's a list that how many of these have already been, are all of them? Have all of them? I think there's 6.
No, the primary cost that we've got right now was the design, which is not included as part of this, but it's primarily the mold abatement that we've done. And the reason we did that was so we could actually tender right away or start construction right away and not have to wait for that. So the mold abatement has been done at a cost of $120,000.
Okay, and then the rest of those cost estimates that you've put in, these increases, are part of the increase, the proposed increase that you have that's in the report.
Right.
So outside of the $120,000.
Plus some design fees.
What are the design fees?
Right now, those design fees are in that $40,000 range.
Okay, so right now about 170,000 has been put, 160 to 170,000 has already been put into it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I had similar questions to Mr. Starr after 30 years in construction here. So if this sort of went, so the first thing was, I was also going to ask about the footprint. So the thing about renovating old guys like this is, does the square footage make sense for what we want to use it for? Or do we have wasted space? I think you need to have an analysis of what we actually need in there and the maximum size we need to build. And when we build, we need to build for the future and build something that you can transition. It may be a shelter now, but let's not build that it stops us from transitioning it into something else in the future. So I mean, the first thing was the year, and I look at, all I have is the picture, and it really looks like chopped up with the roof lines and stuff. I think we could build something that's more holistic. It already takes into account the being compliant with accessibility. I look at the cost, the overage there, $472,000 to get in early. I've never had on one of my job sites somebody charge me more to get in early. If they're talking about overtime, they could just put a few more guys on the job and get it done within actual hours. So that number sort of like blew me out of the water. Never had that, never. So I would support Councillor Starr in saying we need to look at it from anew and create something that is more accessible all around. I think that's a huge challenge. And yes, I agree with the mold abatement. Been in that situation many times, and it usually points to something else. And if you're already seeing it, the moment you open up the wall, you're going to find something else and something else. And yeah, I support Councillor Starr about let's move on. Let's find out how many square feet we actually need, the cost to build that, and move forward with some cost analysis.
So
Fair enough.
Councillor Shaughnessy, are you seconding Councillor Starr's motion?
100%. I would choke on those numbers right now for, okay, I think we can do it better. And I think if we're going to do it, we have to do it well and make sure it works for the future, not just because we're doing a patchwork quilt on the building. So yes, I would second it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Jeffrey.
So this is a pretty sobering report. And I remember when our Advocates for Youth came in and they talked about a crisis, about an emergency, and we took 3 months to make a decision to move forward on this because we were trying to be careful and we were trying to do our due diligence. And this property was the result of that due diligence. The shocking thing to me is it's a former daycare full of asbestos, not meeting fire code, and not meeting building code compliance, as well as HVAC. So I don't know anybody who does a renovation where it comes in under budget. So, you know, that's never a surprise. And a building of this age, we have buildings throughout Brampton that are all having the same challenges. The challenge is we own the building, so the work has to be done, or we need to knock it down and start all over again. My fear is winter's coming, and we have young people in Brampton who have no bed at all. And I'm guessing in Caledon there are no beds either. So the challenge that we had before we even began this debate is there may be capacity right this minute, but we've got a lot of young people that have no place to go in Brampton, which means they have to be uprooted in the midst of a crisis and go to another community, can't see their friends, can't keep their part-time job, and can't get to school easily. I realize you brought us some sobering facts today. They are high. I wish they were lower. But I want youth shelter beds in Brampton. And we've already taken 3 months to make the decision to go out for tender. I want them in Brampton this year. I didn't think that was going to be so difficult. I realize it's a lot of money, but I don't know what you put on the price of a young person being homeless for months at a time, and it's happening right now. So for me, they're worth it. This is an unexpected surprise. It's higher than I would want to spend. But I believe in our young people, and I want to make sure they have a safe place. I want them to be successful. They're vulnerable. They need our help. I can't think of a time when we should more step up and get this right. We own the property. We've sunk the money into it. It's not like the problem's going to go away. We still are going to have asbestos tomorrow. We're still going to have a building that doesn't meet fire code or HVAC requirements. Our young people deserve it, so I'm not prepared to wait. This is too important. I want to proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sheehy, I think, wants to comment.
Just a point or two of clarification. Building on what Mayor Jeffrey said, yes, we do not have youth beds in Brampton, but we do not turn anyone away in Peel without a bed. And I also wanted to remind Council that when the report was approved, this was seen as an interim solution while we were collecting data and information and evidence to determine what we should do in the longer term.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Next on the board is Councillor Carlson.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little loath to comment about things in Brampton. It's not my home municipality, but if I pretend this is Mississauga for a moment, I can see a lot of good intentions got clustered together in an old building, and the area I represent is full of these beautiful 70s buildings that I run into this debate. I got about 5 right now. What to do with them. So far, I haven't discovered one that was worth saving, because I think that was the low watermark for construction in Ontario. And during those days, beautiful angular buildings that leak everywhere. I know we've got a real push to get some beds, and I don't know if there's an interim solution that you could get something going in Brampton at some location that I'm not aware of. But if you take a deep breath, I'm convinced you'll be better off and far happier a year from now when you go, well, thank goodness we held our breath and put the $3 million into, maybe it's going to be a bigger building, or it's going to have some of the facilities that you could never build into this retrofit. Yeah. So speaking for me, if it was in Mississauga, I say, I know it sucks, but let's do it right, and then we'll have a building to be proud of. This will always be a crappy building from the 70s, and there's thousands of them in Peel and Mississauga and Brampton. So I don't know, Ron, I've worked with many of them. I've got
none of them are good. They're not a good story in one of them. You open them up, you go, uh-oh. And so I guess, kind of sadly, I would have to support the motion to build something, and perhaps it's going to be different. I hope that if you're going to do this, you look at maybe you need 40 bed, I don't know, or some other specialized facility that you can't build into this old clunker. But anyway, that's where I leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Mark, a question to you, just to be clear, there were contractors or bidders out on site. You're saying that they could, even with all of these additional issues, address them in you're saying 4-month period? Or does that mean that under the current, what's been presented here, that there would be youth able to access the beds by December, January?
We were hoping to have them in, based on our current schedule, by Christmas.
So even with all of the additional sort of surprises that you've found, and that's what they're saying? That's what was tendered, and that's what they indicated they could do. But again, that was working 7 days a week, extended hours, realizing that there's noise bylaws and staying in there. So you're really paying overtime prices for the bulk of the construction. So it's more the labor, not necessarily the issues that you're finding.
We've incorporated the issues that we've found
into the timeline?
Into the timeline and the price.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carlson, you're done? Okay. Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I'm going to put on my my Chair of Human Services hat here, and also I'm the councillor for the ward, so I'm very familiar with the site. When the CAO told me this morning about the outcomes of the tenders that they put out, my question to him was exactly what we're discussing right now, is that to spend $2 million on that building is really quite ludicrous. And in fact, we should maybe be looking at a new building. But it gets even more complicated when you're looking at a new building. Just consider the location of this center, and it's just right outside the door on the other side of Bramalea City Center. So you're in the site itself begs for higher density and a higher use than what we would be doing with a shelter for youth. So I would ask council if you would keep in mind that we only got these tenders yesterday. I think the staff said they opened it up last night. It was a surprise. I'm going to ask council to please refer this back to staff. Councillor Moore and I were charged originally to work to look at finding the location of a shelter for youth. So I'm just going to ask you to give staff and us some time to work with staff again, to take a look at the broader issue, to take a look at the costs, and see whether or not, and as pointed out by the commissioner, this was to be an interim solution. So to spend $2 million on an interim solution really does not make a lot of sense. Perhaps we can find an alternative interim solution and better utilize the existing site. But we're not going to find the right answer around. There's too many. There's too many options to consider. So I would like to put a referral on the floor, please, to refer this item back to staff. Entrust it to Councillor Moore and I to work with them and bring something hopefully back to you at the next Regional Council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Miles. Okay, so we still have on the board Councillor Sato, so a referral by Councillor Miles and Councillor Moore is now on the floor. So Councillor Sato. You're on the board next.
Thank you.
Councillor Fonseca,
Okay.
sorry, the speaker
motion?
should be to the motion of referral of this right now.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
and I'm going to speak to the motion of referral. Councillor Miles, I applaud you for what you have just said and what you're proposing. I think it's the most responsible response. You know, I think we're all appalled at the cost to throw away, and it's not going to be $2 million. You know, that's the estimate right now. It's probably going to be $2.5 or $3 million. And I think the youth of Brampton deserve better than an old 1960s renovated building, which, as Councillor Carlson said, will never be up to snuff anyway. So I think Mayor Jeffrey is right. You know, you want to get the kids in. Staff have assured us that they will take care of the youth over the winter. And I don't think you throw good money after bad on a building like this. And I think your solution, I would much prefer to be spending $4 or $5 million on a building that is going to truly serve the youth of Brampton, and or even more if that's what is required to give them proper shelter. And I think giving you that time for sober thought and review with staff is the very responsible thing to do. So I fully support what you've suggested, and thank you for doing so.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sprovieri speaking to the referral.
Yes, I will, Madam Chair. Thank you. And I too, Councillor Miles, agree with you totally. I believe that when we do things, we should do it right, do it once, and spend the money and not have to go back and redo it again at a later time. So I totally support your referral. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Jeffrey.
I'm happy to support the referral. I agree with Councillor Starr. I want the best facility possible, and this is certainly unpleasant news to hear. And I guess what I hear, you're hopefully going to come back with another interim solution, but we need an interim solution. So I expect an interim solution. When we come back, that's something that is more palatable from a financial perspective, but we need a better long-term solution. And I don't know that all of us appreciated how interim this recommendation was. So thank you for your leadership.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moore.
Well, thank you, and I'm obviously, as a seconder of the referral motion, going to support it. I do think that we're charging ourselves with more than an uphill battle. During the months that we were looking at the interim solution, we did really leave no stone unturned and explored a number of options. So, you know, we're going to have to find some more stones to overturn, I guess. But you know, this promises, and if, you know, there are folks from Caledon can tell you, because they probably read the Farmer's Almanac more than I do, but those who've read it say this is going to be a harsh winter. And more than ever, I think we need to make sure that these youth have a place to go for this winter. While they may not, you know, as in the words of the Commissioner, not go without the bed, this is the concept and the conversation that we've had around the youth shelter. It's not just a bed. It's, you know, a survival kit, really, for these young people. So I think we understand the urgency, and certainly staff, so we'll roll up our sleeves again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm going to support the referral as well, but I think, Councillor Moore, you articulated what I want to bring up. My concern is that this interim solution, which was presented now, I assumed all avenues were exhausted already. So, you know, to go away and to think that we're going to come back with another perfect interim solution, there's not going to be a perfect interim solution. And, you know, not to be pulling at pulling at heartstrings, I think, you know, the mayor really articulated what the real issue and what the real impact is there. So for us to come back and look for that perfect interim solution, it's not going to happen. And this is where my concern is. However, you know, I will support the referral. I believe in my colleagues. I believe in staff. And I just hope that there's urgency to this and that, you know, this doesn't get dragged on to try to discuss a perfect solution. I think there comes a time where we have to understand it's not the perfect solution, but it's the right solution. And that's what I'm hoping that we do. So I will support the referral, and thank you, Councillor Moore and Councillor Miles, for stepping up.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Starr.
Yeah, speaking to that, probably in my original motion, that's what I was trying to precipitate, was to take a good long look at everything. And I think you've hit it on the head, Councillor Miles. And, you know, the youth aren't going to be displaced, as I'm told. And yes, there can't be, Councilor Medeiros, you hit it on the head there too. There isn't going to be anything perfect in the meantime. Maybe you're going to have to rent a storefront. Maybe you're going to have to rent another building. Maybe something, because no matter what, even if it was a renovation, I don't believe in my heart of hearts that you'd ever finish on December 31st. I'll just tell you that right up front. Even if we gave you approval today, that would not happen. And I just think that moving ahead this way with a good, wholesome report, get all the options worked out, and I think whatever is good for Brampton will be good for the region. And you know, I'm happy to support also a higher amount of money for a better building, because what we're doing is something for the future. And I think that should be considered too. You know, not just cap it at $1.5 million or $2 million. What are we doing for the long term? And I think that's so important. Because why would you build two buildings in the same area if you found, we miscalculated and it should have been 42 beds instead of 30, like we always had some sort of cap. So I think, Madam Acting Chair, that's a great solution. I'm happy to support it and withdraw my other motion or whatever.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Starr. Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I couldn't have said it any better than Councillor Starr just said. I do support the referral, and I just ask that maybe the two ambassadors to this and staff have a look at the Martin Way building on Hanson. The second floor is...
We're on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so very good discussion. Thank you to everybody. And just so for clarification, right now on the list that was presented in the presentation from Mark, 160,000 has been put in, just for clarification purposes on numbers. Definitely a sense of urgency, and council supports not only that urgency, but also finding supports for youth in the community, both an interim and a long-term solution. And thank you, Councillor Miles and Councillor Moore, for bringing the referral forward. So the referral is to bring back a updated presentation or proposal at the next council meeting. Yes? Okay. Councillor Miles, you're on the board again.
Well, I just wanted to point out one thing, and that I know we've expended funds removing the mold and the asbestos from the building. I'm going to make the assumption that that's not lost dollars, that in any event we would have had to remove that from the building, whether we were demolishing it or whether or not we were rebuilding. So I don't want the public to have the impression that it's dollars that have been thrown away. It's not. It would have had to have been done anyway, no matter what, in dealing with it. So it's not.
Okay. Yes,
you know
I agree.
I mean. Okay.
I just think it wasn't necessarily clear in the report. I think we need to make sure that that's clear, that that would have had to have been done anyway. And just to make sure it's clear that all of these other items weren't. They're on the list, but they haven't been. The money hasn't been invested. So, okay. So moved by Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Moore. A referral, working with staff, that this be brought back. That a proposal for the youth shelter be brought back at the next council meeting. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Okay, moving on to items of correspondence. We've moved already 11.1. 11.2 is a referral letter to a referral to corporate services. This is with regards to information on the Ontario Municipal Board. Councillor Tovey.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Oh, that's loud. It's lovely. It's an echo in here. I find this really, really interesting, because here's the ministry now announcing that they're going to be commencing a review of the scope and effectiveness of the Ontario Municipal Board, which they announced 2 years ago. as well. So they're re-announcing the commencement of a study. I find this pretty ludicrous because the Ontario Municipal Board is really controlling a lot of what we put in our official plans. As everyone knows, the Ontario Municipal Board just decides whatever they want, and it's one member. It's not a fair system. We've been very strong in it at the Region of Peel. Also at AMO, we've been very strong on this, and I'm quite surprised that they're re-announcing something they announced 2 years ago that they had promised was going to be finished a year ago this month. So I find that a little crazy.
I think the mayor of Brampton started it.
Yeah, actually, I think you might have been the one who started. So it was more than 2 years ago. Yeah. You're slinking under the desk, Linda. So, I mean, this is, great news that they're doing this, but when we met with Minister Morrow and with our Government Relations Committee at AMO, and we asked him about this, I was pretty shocked that he said not only will we not be bringing out any recommendations or legislation, but we will probably be bringing a paper out in the fall, which is, in the meantime, the OMB basically controls our official plans and the way we would like to do growth. So what I would ask is that this item would come to the Growth Management Committee so that we could have a good fulsome discussion on Peel's position, make sure that we're really solid on that position, get that position in, and then start talking to other area municipalities about the importance of this. They even have a cute little website, OMB Reviewed at ontario.ca, and I would hope everyone would tweet that out to your relatives and particularly your neighbors and residents. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Tovey, you'll move referral to corporate services as well as a report to the Growth Management Committee? Okay. Moved by Councillor Tovey, seconded by Mayor Thompson. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll move 11.3 and 11.9 together. They both are correspondence. They're for receipt with regards to Northwest Brampton shale resources policies in the Region of Peel official plan. Seeing no one on the board, moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Moore. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. We moved item 11.4 already. Item 11.5 is from Minister Del Duca with regards to the GTA West corridor. This is for receipt. Moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Item 11.6 is from Minister Sousa. This is referral to the Finance Department. And this is with regards to amendments to the Assessment Act. Seeing no questions, I had one question. Will there be, because there could be impacts on not-for-profit housing, will there be a report or any information brought back to Peel Living or to Regional Council? Or I guess my request would be to bring that back if it's not already being brought back.
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe a report is in the works for October on that matter.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so moved by Councillor Sato, seconded by Councillor Medeiros. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And we'll move 11.7 and 11.8 together. These are letters with regards to changes to the 4 land use plan. This is for receipt. Moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Pleshy. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And 11.9 is a letter from the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry. It's receipt.
You already did
we
that
did
one.
that one. That is right, we did. Okay. Back to you, Madam Acting Chair.
And just before I pass this on to Councillor Starr, I want to make sure you guys know that I'm spying, and the CAO and the clerk write down every name that says we'll spend more money. Just want you guys to be careful. Councillor Starr?
Okay, I don't want to spend any more money, so cancel all these requests. 12.1, Engineering Services, Town of Caledon, Wards 2 and 4. Questions? Comments? Moved by Councillor Downey, seconded by Councillor Innes. All in favor? Carried. Engineering Services, there's a bunch of awards here for detailed design and contract administration for Regional Road. Any questions or comments? Moved by Councillor Mahoney, seconded by Councillor Medeiros. All in favor? Carried. 12.3. This is in the City of Mississauga, Ward 1, Engineering Services. Councillor Tovey's not here. Councillor Rast, would you like to move that?
Yes, sir.
And Councillor Kovac, all in favor? Carried. We have the application by Yuan Ming Market. This is the final step of the Retail Business Holidays Act for holiday opening. Moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Councillor Kovac. Oh, Councillor Kovac. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I know I'm not the most vocal of councillors. Did want to share a few of my comments. I know regional staff are recommending support, seemingly based on 2 points: that there was a public meeting held on July 7th, we're all aware of, and that no one from the public had spoken out. But it was not really widely circulated, was it? That's kind of the first point. They're also relying on the professional judgment of the applicant's consultant, which I found a little bit ironic, considering he's being paid to argue in support of, obviously, the application. The consultant argues that his client meets tourism criteria outlined in the Retail Business Holiday Act. And the question, to what extent can a supermarket be deemed a tourist destination? You have, in and around that area, you've got Riverwood, you have Everest College, you've got a number of parks, so that seems to be a good argument. But also, if you look, you've got Ocean Fresh Food Market, you've got John's Lions Auto Body. I don't know if that could be argued. That's a tourist attraction. Pizza Hut's there. You've got Kentucky Fried Chicken. Hopefully they won't all be stepping forward asking for an exemption. I think we must be very careful of setting a precedent. Conversely, we have entities like Square One, which you could make the point, are not, and yet they do have that designation. So I know it's a little bit tricky, a bit of a gray area. And I also understand it from the owner's standpoint. It will increase the number of days that he can sell product, and I worry very much about the pressure that would be placed on the employees. You don't work Canada Day or Labor Day, what might happen to you there? So I'm not sure if I'm comfortable supporting with this request. No one else looked like they were willing to speak to it, but I just wanted to get that out there. Thank you.
Mayor Crombie?
I'd like to move the report. It's consistent with the exemption we've granted to similar kinds of businesses in the same area proximate to Square One. Thank you.
And I'll comment also that with the tourist attraction, it has nothing to do with the building. It has to do with what's in the area, in a 2 or 3 kilometer area. And you have, if you read the report, there's probably half a dozen or 10 areas of significance that also fitted in with TNT and Oceans and all the rest of it. And it's totally consistent, by the way. And it's a wonderful market in Ward 6. Back to you.
Thank you for that. I have no intention of beating up on the supermarket. I actually have fond memories of going often on a Friday with my uncle. We would pick up fish from the fresh market. Red snapper, put that on the barbecue. It tastes great. Really, really love the spot. It was more my struggling to see the argument. Again, I get it, but is it because it's got the ethnic tie that makes it attractive? I'm not so sure, but those are my comments.
Okay, it's moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All in favor? Carried. Okay, and I guess the other part of that report is for information is the overall report with respect to the Yuan Ming Market for information and receipt. Moved by Councillor Provieri. How's that? And we'll get you into Mississauga a little bit. Okay. And Councillor McFadden, all in favor? Carried. One piece of correspondence from Brock Carlton.
I'll move it.
Moved by Mayor Thompson, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Starr. Under 14.1, we have a request from Gurjeet and Parmarjeet Minhas residents to delegate the September 22nd Regional Council meeting regarding an appeal to Regional Council to write off an unexpected high water bill, and direction is required. I'm told by the clerk generally we refer this to Dan, who waves a magic wand and fixes it all. No, he's shaking his head. Would someone like to move? I think it's, who's the councillor for this area?
Councillor Spovieri.
Councillor Spovieri, do you want to move it, go to Dan first?
What's the address?
11 Forest.
There's no address on the indicated. I read that, but there is no address.
It's 11 Fossil Street.
Fossil?
Fossil. It's in your ward, sir.
Okay, well, I'll move it we here.
To Dan?
Yeah.
Dan, you want to speak? You want to defend this?
Not
Somebody's
about
got to.
defense, just want to let council know we've already been in discussion with this resident and offered the magic wand solution, which that's why they want to come and delegate to you. They didn't like our proposal. So I'll just repeat exactly what we've already offered to him, which is a long-term payment and no write-off. And he wants council to write it off, and that's, I have no authority to write off water bills.
Councillor Spovieri, do you want to hear them on the 22nd?
Through you, Madam Chair, just staff. Do we know whether the water, there was a water leak inside or outside the premises?
Our investigation, Madam Chair, on site when we visited was we found leaking plumbing fixtures in the basement and pointed that out, and, you know, anyway, that's, I don't want to get into more details. It's kind of personal at that point, but our view is we've tested the meter works, and we identified a number of leaking fixtures, toilets and things like that in their basement apartment. And as such, the bill stands from our perspective.
Madam Chair, there have been other people before us in the past, and council has been very firm on maintaining staff's policy, and I agree with that. The only thing I want to say is that if we refuse these people, it may give a bad impression on democratic right. And if they want to take the time and come before us, and perhaps staff can advise them that council has had this discussion, and that council support their position. But if they wish to come here to have their say, I think that let democracy work and let them come. So.
Well, I just hope you realize you're going to get a lot of leaking water toilets and tons of people coming in here
complaining. You're not going to get me saying that we should give them a break. I'm not going to say that.
Okay. And referring them to your office wouldn't help. You could sit there in wise judgment.
No.
No?
No, they want to.
It's on Fossil Court. You're perfect.
Oh, cheeky.
I only said it because I love you. So, okay, you're gonna move a motion that we hear them at the next council meeting.
Well, I think it's up to council.
Just move the motion, sir.
Yeah, I'll move the motion.
And get a seconder.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. Oh, fossil. All those in favor?
The two fossils.
Two fossils. Okay, so they will be on our next agenda. This should be interesting.
Okay, Madam
And if
Fossil.
I'm still here as a Madam Fossil, I will. Okay, and we have Councillor Shaughnessy's notice of motion on the next agenda. We go to bylaw 16.1. Whoa, what? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't raise this at the beginning of the meeting, Madam Acting Chair, but I have a question, if I could, for staff. I'm not sure if it needs a notice of motion. Yesterday in General Committee, we approved the extension of the registration for the affordable pilot, transportation pilot, to the end of October. It's very, very low uptake, is my understanding, from our MyWay staff, and we wanted to make sure that over the summer people didn't really know about it, so we wanted to give them an extra 2 months. So my question is, do we need to do the same thing here at the region, or is it okay that just the city extended it to the end of October?
Yeah, I don't know.
How about we take that under advisement till the 22nd, because we'll have to look at what that motion
Well,
said.
we've already extended, I mean,
We've extended ours.
We've extended ours, so it is extended, but we need to do promotion to, we need our My Way staff, we've given them direction to get promotion out as quickly as possible. And I guess my concern is if we leave it to the 22nd, then we're into like 4 or 5 weeks before the expiration date.
Madam Chair, if I may, I think the only reason we want to extend it is so that we know what the correct procedure is for us to extend our participation in it for the same period of time.
Yeah.
I don't have the original motion in front of me, so I don't know if we need a 2/3 vote to open it and reset the date, or if we can just go ahead. So I would suggest the city can go ahead with the promotion. Council agreed in principle to be a part of this pilot. All we need to do is make sure we have the correct process to extend the date if we need to.
Okay, and I apologize, I didn't raise it at the beginning, but it popped into my head halfway through the meeting, Madam Chair, that perhaps we should be dealing with it here as well. But we need to get the promotion out so people know they have the next, it's only a month and a half now, and no promotion has really been done. There was an article in the Mississauga News said end of September. Council did not support end of September. It was a surprise to all of us. And we approved the end of October. So all of that promotion still has to be done and get the proper information out to the public. But as long as it's not going to have a negative impact on Peel staff, well, if it does, it does. Sorry. we need to serve those residents who need the service.
It was just extended till October.
So maybe we should be approving in principle. I'm just not sure if anything needs to be done.
Councillor Sato, you seem to know the date yesterday. Is it approved to the end of September on our previous motion?
We did not approve it to the end of September. The previous motion approved to the end of August, to August 31st.
Here at the region as well?
I'm not sure what the region's motion was. At the city, the original project was to the end of August, and that's what was what was promoted. It was on the website and everything else. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to pull it. Councillor Tovey and I were in a meeting with My Way in August, dealing with the food bank ticket issue, and Geoff Martineau at the time raised that he thought we may have to extend it. Councillor Tovey and I agreed and said, I'm sure council will approve that. And we talked about extending to the end of October. Unfortunately, someone jumped the gun and promoted end of September, which was never approved by council. So we're kind of in a messy situation here. And so yesterday we cleaned it up. We approved it to the end of October. But our original was the end of August for registration. I don't think extending it is going to impact the pilot itself. It's just the registration period, which will impact regional staff because you're doing the intake.
David?
And I'm not sure if city staff spoke with you before this announcement September was made. I don't think anybody was consulted.
Madam Chair, I'd suggest that council give direction to staff to work with the city on the new timeline, come back to council if required.
On the end of October, which is
with
what
any
council
approval that may be required.
Okay, if we could give that direction, Madam Chair. And again, I apologize if I'd raised it earlier. You might have had some time to research it, but just realized we had to deal with it today.
If I were more than a temporary chair, one of the things I would do would have a question period at the end of this. We have it in Mississauga, but it's scary for the staff because the weirdest and most wonderful things come up. So the onus should be on us as well to give notice at the beginning of a meeting so the staff can answer the questions. So maybe we should look at that when Frank gets back and see if we could add that as an agenda item, that questions of council. Okay, we're moving to, the direction's been given, everybody's happy with that, nobody's jumping up and down. Okay, 16.1, you have to actually pass the bylaw that permits Yan Ming Supermarket to run on stat holidays. That the bylaw listed on the Regional Council agenda being bylaw 44-2016 be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All those in favor? Any opposed? Oh, I need a mover and a seconder, okay. Mayor. Okay, Councillor Starr moves, Mayor Crombie seconds. All those in favor? All those opposed? You hang in there. Okay, now we do have one in-camera matter. It's in Councillor Miles' ward. It apparently is a straightforward purchase. Do we need to go in camera? Councillor Miles? You'll move it? Seconder? Councillor Moore? All those in favor? Okay, I have to read it. That the recommendations contained within the confidential report relating to item 17.1 listed on the September 8th, 2016 Regional Council agenda be approved and become public upon adoption. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Okay, and we have the confirming bylaw. Do I get to sign some of this stuff? Oh, so cool. Okay, bylaw 45-2016. I might get to really like this spot. We should tell Frank. Bylaw 45-2016 to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its meeting held on September 8th, 2016, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region of Peel bylaws relating thereto, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the acting regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal affixed thereto. Does somebody have to move it? Mover? Councillor Innes, who's been very quiet. Seconder, Councillor Mahoney. All those in favor? Carried. This is really cool having somebody hand stuff to you, too. Councillor Ross, I would like in future meetings for you to hand me things like this. That the September 8th, 2016 Regional Council meeting be adjourned. Mover, Councillor, or Mayor Thompson. Seconder, Councillor Downey. All those in favor? Good. We're out of here. No, we're not changing the rotation. This was fun.
We already looked into that.
There may be food in the back room, folks.
I think they're still bringing up some of the food.
Okay.
It's halfway there.
Okay. Right on.
Change and build that control. So after this, one of the lovely things of universities and schools is a lot of the upper year students get into things like Ritalin and Adderall, using it, abusing it without having full knowledge of what it's doing.
Starts out for studying, ends up for partying.
Yeah, exactly. Leads to higher level drugs because they're all methyl derivatives of the same amphetamine.
Yeah, increasing your dopamine.
Exactly. Yeah, you know it, brother. Yeah. So been a naturalist my whole life, personal trainer, body's my temple, athlete, would have never in a million years got into any forms of drugs. And hey, after 2 panic attacks, I canceled both LSAT scores. I had one more shot. I said, what the heck? And it's amazing how fast things can change.
What did you do differently?
I decided to give Ritalin a try.
Okay.
Because my upper year friends who are pre-med students, who are medical students, they were abusing, the Ritalin, the drugs, and etc., and constantly had been urging me, however many years through university, to try it, and I had always denied and didn't need it. My brain was good.
So how did you do? What was the score?
So I ended up taking the Ritalin and sent my brain overboard. So it was doing 4 times the recommended dosage. My friends, they didn't have a clue what the heck to do, but they were telling me, "Oh, Chris, get it in your system, get it in your system." Which is, the exact opposite that you want. You don't want your brain to have to, stabilize with all those drugs in your system.
True.
So it ended up sending my brain in overdrive, and that's what any speed, any amphetamine does. It just speeds the brain up.
It does.
So for me, this eventually
did it work for the test?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It sent, yeah, no, it sent things overboard.
We're going to talk about overboard in a second because we do have a short commercial break. We're going to go to that short commercial break right now, and we're going to come back with Chris Wylie, who's going to tell you why he became the game changer.
What's wrong with the shoreline? Everybody says, oh, there's Lake Ontario. Isn't that very nice? It's a beautiful day and it's blue water and there's sailboats out there. So that's all we care about. Too often people just look beyond the shoreline and they don't notice what's down there at their feet. Since I've been around and paying attention since World War II and the big building boom, there's been great civilization creep moving west, putting in concrete and putting in artificial crushed rocks. Everybody knows that the biodiversity and potential for life is much greater at the interface between different types of habitat. People have been planting alien species, and there's a lot of alien species that have come in by accident, both on dry land and in the water. The famous zebra mussels are one of the worst things that is happening in the aquatic zones of the shorelines. A lot of shorelines, including Lake Ontario shoreline, have marshes as well as beaches, as well as woodland growing right up to the shoreline. And it's an essential place where migrants stop over after they come across the lake and they're coming north in the springtime and they're exhausted. And if these interface areas between the lake and the shore are degraded, then it's going to be disastrous for these exhausted creatures that need to fuel up for continuing the migration. It's time we started paying attention and actually doing something about returning the shoreline to its original beauty. What the world needs now is CPR, conservation, protection, and restoration. It's even more important than people are realizing. We can have a beautiful planet for our grandchildren and our grandchildren's grandchildren. All we need is to raise awareness. The most essential first step in helping to protect the environment, such as Lake Ontario shoreline or anything in the environment, is the raising of consciousness. Groups and organizations of smart people, such as the Credit Valley Conservation, can be very, very useful in raising consciousness. We need public involvement. We need lots of people paying attention, speaking to each other, getting together in neighborhoods, getting together at meetings and forums and so on. If just families went out in nature for a couple of hours every weekend, it would be transformative and wonderful for the kids, and obviously wonderful for nature and consciousness raising as well. I strongly advocate every single person get out there. A difference will indeed be made.
Packaging like this pop case can't be recycled as one item because plastic and cardboard are sold as two separate items. Please remove the plastic from the cardboard. Flatten the cardboard and then put it into the blue box. Place the plastic wrap inside of a plastic bag along with other wrap and plastic bags. Tie the bag and it can go into the box as well. Our sorting machines move too quickly to separate the items at the recycling facility.
Welcome back to the Dynamo Show. I'm James Erd, and this is episode 8. We've already had 2 fantastic guests, and we're midway through with our third, Chris Wylie, the game changer. So let's get back to your story, my friend.
Yeah, man. So basically, the Ritalin sent my brain way overdrive, amplified the anxiety, the emotion, emotional centers, led to out of control behavior, led to addictive behaviors, led to illicit behaviors, things I would have never done. And third panic attack on the third LSAT exam, was hospitalized, 140 pounds. I'm 6'3". I look like an emaciated version of myself.
Okay.
And that's like, one of my profile photos is that transformation from then to where I am now.
Yeah.
And at that point, when I was lying in a hospital bed, I reached that point, just asked myself, what the hell am I doing? And at that moment, I, went on my mission to pursue what I loved. So I switched my degree from going to Harvard Law MBA to getting a degree in neuroscience. I got into the brain, into brain imaging. I imaged my brain. I saw my anxiety centers, emotional centers were on red alert. Started doing neurofeedback, different forms of brain training, getting into accelerated learning.
Mind mapping.
Yeah, brain mapping.
Mind mapping for others.
Exactly, man.
I did it, by the way. If you guys are interested in a mind map with Chris Wiley, he's going to tell us how to get a hold of him later.
Totally.
Crazy stuff.
QEEG brain mapping, got into the Shaolin Qigong, Tai Chi, sought out the pure masters who knew the ancient forms, started learning from them, and immediately integrating everything together and started really transforming myself.
Good.
Started taking control of the anxiety, started taking control of my brain, and I transformed myself to such a level that now all my colleagues and students were now asking for me, what do I do for my brain? How can I enhance my memory? How can I enhance my learning? So this led to doing research studies at Western, led to me starting my own business, led me to teaching people all the ways and the things I've learned to optimize my brain, my body, and supercharge energy.
Care to share 3 of them with our audience?
Yeah, the number one thing for the brain is your brain works perfectly. So for whatever it is you're doing, if you have anxiety, if you have depression, if you, have super memory abilities, whatever your brain is doing, it does it well. And the brain is notorious. It's a learning machine. It automates behavior. So anything you're doing now that's stopping you is actually a learned behavior that you're doing remarkably well. And the fact that you do that remarkably well makes it so that you can do something else remarkably well. You think of myself, I had anxiety. I'd make pictures in my head of me just getting stressed out in the exam, and those feelings would just spin through my body. I mean, because I learned and mastered that, it was just as easy for me when having the skills to then learn and change, the pictures, the movie I was making in my mind.
The movie, I love
how
that.
I was feeling.
Yeah, the projection.
Exactly. Yeah. Really seeing and targeting my brain towards what I want, because the brain is not a simple feedback machine, it's a targeting machine. And the brain targets towards what you aim it at. So the more you think of depression, the more you think of anxiety, the more you think, why am I so fat? The more your brain's gonna focus in on that. But as soon as you shift focus and you build the desire, you build the dreams, if you're an entrepreneur, you build the dream for yourself, you find your passions, now your brain is something to move towards. And then when you have that desire, that dream to move towards, then it's about acquiring the skills to get you there.
And stay there.
Yeah, exactly. So
now I know there's a lot of parents that watch this show. Okay, there's a lot